I never thought a Monday morning could feel like the calm before a storm. But there I was, Malik Thompson, walking through the glass doors of Redwood Global's Midtown office. Tie straight, shoes polished, and heart hammering like a snare drum. I had been here for 10 years. 10 years of late nights debugging code. 10 years of sitting in meetings that meant nothing but giving every ounce of energy I had, and somehow I was still invisible. Invisible. That word kept bouncing around in my head as the elevator dinged and the doors slid open. The marble lobby gleamed, sunlight reflecting off the skyscrapers across the street. People passed by in tailored suits and shiny heels, their laughter echoing off the walls like a soundtrack for a world I'd never really belonged to. And yet, I'd built half of that world. Every system, every line of code that kept this company running, it had my fingerprints on it. I remember the first time it hit me, the moment I realized that work and recognition are not always equal. I was 22, fresh out of Georgia Tech, full of hope, and sitting across from my manager in a glass-walled conference room. "Malik," he said, eyes sliding over me like I was part of the furniture. "You're reliable, but you're not visible enough." Invisible. Again. I smiled politely, nodded, and left. 10 years later, the echo of that line still haunted me. The truth is, I didn't need the applause. I thrived on solving problems, on seeing a project come together because of what I built. But there's a certain weight that comes with being unseen, a quiet rage that simmers under the surface. And Mondays, somehow, always reminded me of it. That morning was different. Something in the air felt off. The usual hum of keyboards and phones seemed muted, almost holding its breath. I passed my team on the 10th floor, nodding at faces I barely knew, faces that looked right through me. And then I saw her, Serena Vaughn, senior project lead, walking down the hall like the world had been made just for her. Everyone turned, smiles plastered, compliments whispered. She had this glow, this unshakable presence that made you feel small just by existing in the same room. I hated her, and, in some strange way, I envied her. She stopped and caught my eye. I smiled, polite, understated. "Morning, Serena," I said, my voice steady despite the surge of irritation curling in my chest. "Malik," she replied, a tight, almost clinical smile. "Don't you have something to finish?" The emphasis made it clear. I was a minor inconvenience, a shadow in her light. I shrugged, but I could feel my pulse quicken. That little interaction, barely more than a glance, felt like an accusation. A reminder that after all these years, I was still a background character in the story I had helped write. By 10 a.m., the office was buzzing with whispers. Someone had leaked news about a gala for the company's top innovators. A celebration of our latest product launch. I hadn't been invited, not that it surprised me. The invitation list always had names that sparkled in the press releases. Names that made the boardrooms look like a runway. And there I was, Malik Thompson, standing on polished floors, unnoticed and uncelebrated. I grabbed a coffee from the break room, watching my reflection in the stainless steel fridge. Brown skin, crisp suit, tired eyes. I traced the lines under my eyes, proof of every late night spent debugging. Every skipped lunch, every time I had chosen work over recognition. And still, invisible. Then came the email. Short, 3 lines, almost clinical. "Malik Thompson, your position is no longer required." I read it 3 times, thinking maybe my tired eyes were deceiving me. The office hum faded, replaced by the rapid beating of my heart. The world outside those glass walls continued, honking horns, street vendors yelling, the pulse of Atlanta alive, but inside, everything went silent. My first instinct was disbelief, then anger, then fear. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles burned. How could this happen? 10 years. 10 years of loyalty. Of solving problems nobody else could. Of carrying projects when everyone else gave up. And yet, they could just erase me? I thought about my family, my mom, who raised me on the south side of Atlanta with nothing but hope and determination, my dad, who taught me that pride isn't measured by applause but by what you endure. I remembered my little brother, watching me as I left for my first job, believing I could build something bigger than myself. And now, It felt like all of that belief was being stripped away. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the reality settle like cold water. Then a thought hit me, sharp as a blade. They think they can erase me because I haven't played by their rules. Because I've been quiet. Because I haven't shined for them. Let them watch. Let them think I'm gone. Because they haven't seen the fire yet. I took a deep breath and let the silence fill me. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot. Outside the window, the city roared. Inside, I plotted. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. The next morning, the city didn't feel any different. But I did. Malik Thompson, invisible no longer, had a plan. The sting of betrayal was fresh. But sharper than that was clarity. 10 years of being overlooked. Undervalued. Erased. They'd given me the blueprint for what to do next. I walked into Redwood Global like a man with a mission. The usual hustle. The hollow laughter in the hallways. The click of heels on marble floors. It all became my background music. But this time, I wasn't a ghost in the machine. I was a predator. Step 1. Gather intel. I started small, hidden in plain sight. I leaned closer to whispers in the hallways. Paid attention to meetings I wasn't officially invited to. And dug through old files on my work computer. Every project Serena had touched. Every accidental error she had blamed on someone else. Every report that conveniently ignored the contributions of people like me. I catalogued it all. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally. I had to smile when people congratulated Serena on her latest victory. Smile and nod when the board praised her foresight. Each time, a tiny spark of anger flared, anger that I funneled into discipline. I began coming in earlier, leaving later, documenting everything, not just her mistakes, but patterns, financial shortcuts, mismanaged timelines, even ethical breaches that would make the HR department squirm if anyone knew. I wasn't just playing defense, I was constructing a map, a dossier, a weapon, every whispered secret, every overlooked misstep, each one a piece in a puzzle that would expose the truth. And Serena, oh, she was already watching me. I could feel her subtle glances, her tight smiles. She had that predator's sixth sense. Thinking I was rattled, thinking I was broken. They all did, but they didn't know that beneath my calm exterior, a storm was gathering. By week 2, I had compiled enough data to make someone sit up and listen. Emails carefully saved, meeting notes annotated, inconsistencies highlighted in spreadsheets that only I knew how to read. Every line of evidence screamed, Redwood isn't perfect, and Serena isn't invincible. But this was about more than revenge. It was about respect, recognition, justice. I wasn't just taking them down for what they did to me. I was showing every young black professional in this office, in this city, in this industry, that being underestimated was a mistake they'd live to regret. I began to test the waters. A misplaced report here, a strategic leak of minor errors there, nothing catastrophic. Just enough to make them start questioning Serena's perfection. I watched the ripple effect. Felt the tension in the office rise. People whispered, glanced, hesitated. Redwood's shining star was showing cracks. And I thrived on it. Late nights became my ritual. I sat in my apartment overlooking the city. Lights of Atlanta shimmering like a constellation of opportunities. Coffee cups piled high, computer screens glowing, and my notebook, my battlefield map, spread across the table. Each plan meticulously plotted, when to release what, who to involve, how to keep myself invisible until the moment of impact. One night, I received a text from an anonymous source. If you want the real story, meet me at the parking garage after hours. Midnight. I felt a chill. I knew danger when it whispered my name. But this was exactly the kind of risk I was ready to take. Corporate warfare was never clean. It was never safe. And yet, adrenaline surged through my veins like molten fire. At midnight, the parking garage was a cathedral of shadows. The only sounds were the distant hum of street traffic and the echo of my own boots on concrete. A figure emerged from behind a pillar, small, wiry, cautious. You Malik Thompson? The voice asked. I am, I replied, heart steady despite the tension. Good. they said, sliding a USB across the concrete. Everything you need is here. Proof Serena's been covering up the finance errors. Payroll discrepancies. Bonus manipulations. Favoritism, it's all there. I picked up the device. Fingers brushing against cold metal. My pulse jumped. This was it, the first piece of real ammunition in my fight. The first strike in a war they didn't even know had begun. As I walked back to my car, city lights reflecting off the wet asphalt, a thought cut through my mind. They thought erasing me was the end. But this was only the beginning. I returned to my apartment, plugged the USB into my laptop, and felt a surge of vindication. The files were raw, uncut, undeniable. Every irregularity, every misstep Serena had masked with charm and authority. Every favor given at the expense of others, it was all laid bare. I leaned back in my chair, hands clasped behind my head. A slow smile spread across my face. The game had begun, and Malik Thompson never played to lose. I wasn't just fighting for a job anymore. I was fighting for recognition, for justice, for every young black professional who had been sidelined, underestimated, erased. And when Redwood finally felt the impact, I would be the one standing in the wreckage, calm, collected, victorious. Because revenge wasn't just about punishment, it was about legacy. The morning of the board meeting, the air in Redwood Global's Midtown office felt thick, like it knew what was coming. Every footstep, every murmur, every clatter of a coffee cup against porcelain seemed louder than usual. And I, Malik Thompson, underestimated for years, was ready. I walked past the familiar marble floors. The same laughter, the same superficial nods, but this time, I carried more than a briefcase. I carried a dossier that could topple a queen, and I knew exactly how to use it. Serena, radiant and smug in her tailored suit, spotted me immediately. Her smile faltered, not because she feared me yet, but because she sensed something had shifted. I could almost hear her calculating her next move. How much does he know? How bold will he be? The boardroom smelled of leather, espresso, and polished ambition. Members of the executive team murmured greetings, but their eyes betrayed curiosity, and, secretly, doubt. Serena cleared her throat, projecting confidence that felt thin under the weight of anticipation. Malik, she said, eyes sharp, I wasn't expecting you here, but I'm sure you have something to add? I placed my briefcase on the table, letting it thud against the polished surface. A small sound, but heavy with intent. I do, I said, calm, measured, and I think everyone here will want to see this. With deliberate motions, I opened the briefcase and pulled out the first USB drive. This contains records, emails, financial reports, and internal audits that document patterns of favoritism, mismanagement, and ethical oversights under Serena's supervision. Every decision, every error she masked, it's all here. A silence fell over the room. Phones were pulled out, tablets flickered, eyes widened, Serena's posture stiffened. The carefully constructed facade of control she wore for years now trembled in front of the board. I believe in accountability, I continued, voice steady but piercing. Redwood Global deserves transparency. Its employees deserve fairness, and its leaders must be held responsible when they misuse their authority. Whispers rippled through the room like a current of electricity. The CEO, a man usually unflappable, leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the screen. This is serious. Malik, are these verified? Yes, I said. Every piece of evidence has been cross-checked. Every irregularity can be traced. This isn't speculation, it's fact. And it's time someone finally acknowledged it. Serena's cheeks flushed, a mixture of anger and disbelief. She tried to interject, to charm, to spin her way out, but it was too late. The board had already begun digesting the evidence. The whispers grew louder, questions sharper, doubt creeping into their eyes. You've compiled all of this? She spat, voice trembling slightly. I have, I said, because the truth doesn't vanish just because it's inconvenient. And neither do the people it affects. I watched as the room shifted. Board members exchanged glances, quietly questioning their loyalties. The empire Serena had built on manipulation and polished charm was cracking. Piece by piece. The CEO cleared his throat. Serena, we need you to explain these discrepancies. Malik, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Transparency is non-negotiable here. Serena opened her mouth, but I could see the calculation in her eyes, the recognition that years of careful control had unraveled in a single, deliberate act. She realized, finally, that her reign wasn't unassailable. I let the tension hang for a beat. Then I added, softly, but loud enough for the room to hear. This isn't personal. This is justice. For every employee sidelined, every contribution erased, every voice ignored, it's time we honor integrity over image. The room erupted, not in applause, but in acknowledgement. Not every battle is loud. Some victories are quieter, more profound, and this one was mine. Serena's fall wasn't immediate, but the shift was palpable. Confidence drained from her posture. Authority wavered. The board no longer looked at her the same way. I had shown them what they had failed to see before: talent, courage, and truth cannot be silenced forever. As I packed my briefcase and left the room, the city outside seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a message for everyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told they didn't belong. Malik Thompson had arrived, and he wasn't here to ask for recognition. He was here to claim what had always been his. Because revenge isn't just about taking back what's yours. It's about creating a path for those who come after. The morning after the boardroom showdown, the city seemed different. Headlines hadn't hit yet, but the air hummed with anticipation. Redwood Global, once untouchable, now felt fragile under the weight of truth. And I knew, it was time to make it undeniable. I sat at my apartment desk, reviewing every email, every recorded conversation, every document I'd collected, not just for the board, not just for internal accountability, but for the public. Transparency wasn't just a principle, it was a weapon. By noon, the first press releases were drafted, carefully worded, fact-checked, powerful enough to leave no room for misinterpretation. I called journalists I trusted, people who valued integrity over gossip. I didn't leak, I shared, with intent, with purpose. The story unfolded like a movie. Malik Thompson, a black executive overlooked for years, exposing systematic mismanagement and favoritism in one of the city's most prestigious corporations. The narrative was raw, compelling, and relatable. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake, it was about justice, accountability, and the voices often ignored in boardrooms across America. By late afternoon, the first headlines went live. Inside Redwood Global, executive exposes years of mismanagement. Malik Thompson's stand: when truth meets power. A boardroom unmasked: transparency and accountability at Redwood. Social media erupted. Comments poured in from professionals, employees, and young black creatives inspired by Malik's courage. They saw themselves in his fight: ambitious, talented, often overlooked, yet unwilling to settle for silence. Meanwhile, Redwood scrambled. Serena's carefully polished image started to crack publicly. The board, forced into immediate action, initiated internal audits and promised reforms. Malik's evidence became the blueprint for change. Policies on accountability, mentorship, and equitable opportunities were drafted on the fly. I watched the backlash unfold and felt a strange sense of calm. This was bigger than any personal victory. Every article shared, every tweet liked, every conversation sparked. It was about reshaping an environment that had long ignored fairness. By evening, I walked past the same streets I had once rushed through, carrying ambition like armor. Now, every glance, every nod from passers-by felt different. Not just respect, but recognition. The kind that comes when someone sees you standing not just for yourself, but for all those who came before and those who would follow. Serena called me later that night. Her voice had changed. No smirk, no condescension, only acknowledgement. "You've changed things," she said, quietly. "Yes," I replied, "and it's bigger than both of us. Redwood isn't just a company, it's people. And people deserve justice." It was a moment of closure for the boardroom drama, but an opening for the real victory, a public reckoning. Malik Thompson had done more than expose wrongdoing, he'd sparked reform. accountability, and a narrative of empowerment. Because real power, I realized, isn't just climbing the ladder. It's using your position, your voice, and your truth to change the system. For everyone. And that message? It wasn't confined to a boardroom or a press release. It resonated through social feeds, coffee shops, classrooms, and offices. It became a rallying cry. Your voice matters. Your courage matters. And standing up is never wasted. By the end of the week, Redwood had not only committed to internal reforms but also launched a mentorship initiative for underrepresented talent, a legacy built not on fear, but accountability and integrity. I leaned back, looking at the city skyline glowing in the twilight. This was more than corporate revenge. This was corporate justice. And for the first time, I felt what I had been chasing all along. Not recognition. Not vengeance. But a sense of purpose that extended beyond myself. The city outside never sleeps. But inside Redwood Global's Midtown Tower, time seemed to pause. Every fluorescent light in the boardroom felt like a spotlight on destiny. Every polished surface reflecting tension thick enough to taste. I, Malik Thompson, stood at the center of it all. Calm on the surface, storming beneath. This was the culmination of weeks of careful observation, careful planning, careful strategy. Serena sat at the head of the table, flawless in her black blazer and composure. But the air betrayed her. She didn't know what was coming, and the element of surprise was mine. I wasn't just walking in as an employee seeking validation or vengeance. I was walking in as the architect of truth, armed with evidence, allies, and an unshakable sense of purpose. I started slow, deliberately. I unfurled the first set of documents. Projected emails, memos, internal reports, the kind of paper trail that left no room for misinterpretation. These aren't accusations, I said. These are facts. These are the decisions, the patterns, the manipulations that have cost Redwood talent, morale, and credibility. And they stop here. Eyes flicked around the room. Colleagues who had once nodded politely now leaned in. The board members' faces showed curiosity. Unease. Serena's lips pressed into a thin line. I felt the power shift. Subtle but undeniable. I paused, let the weight sink in. Then I turned to Serena, deliberately holding her gaze. You underestimated me, I said, my voice steady but carrying the gravity of everything we'd endured. Not because I was weak or compliant, but because you thought silence was ignorance. It wasn't, it was preparation. And then I released the full force. I presented everything. The hidden reports of mismanaged projects, the ignored complaints, the favoritism, the instances where diversity initiatives were sabotaged under the guise of efficiency. Each revelation landed like a hammer. The board members murmured. Some gasped. The room was tense, suffocating with the truth. Then came the human element, the voices that had been suppressed. Employees who had suffered quietly stepped forward. This is exactly what happened. One said, we were dismissed, ignored, or belittled. Malik brought the proof. Another spoke, tears in her eyes. We didn't know who would stand up for us. We didn't think anyone could. And that's when it hit me. The real victory wasn't just exposing Serena or correcting corporate injustice. It was inspiring courage in others. Each testimony, each confirmation of my findings, made the story bigger than me. This was a communal awakening. The tension escalated further when Serena tried to intervene. Her voice sharp, calculated. Malik, this is not how we resolve issues. You're overstepping your role. I didn't flinch. I let her words hang in the air and addressed the board. Overstepping? No. Taking responsibility for the truth? Absolutely. This company thrives on accountability. Or it falls apart. And we're at a turning point right now. Then, one by one, board members nodded, whispered among themselves, confirmed alignment. I could see the decision crystallizing. Justice was imminent. And then came the official announcement. Immediate reforms. Suspension of mismanaged department heads. Oversight committees. Transparent hiring practices. Diversity and inclusion initiatives, this time genuine. Enforceable. Serena retained her title, but her control, her influence, had irrevocably shifted. The room exhaled collectively, a mix of relief, empowerment, and shock. Cameras outside had begun to flash through the glass walls. Social media feeds lit up with the story of Malik Thompson standing his ground. And while the city cheered, the true moment of triumph was quieter, almost intimate, seeing the faces of those who had been silent for years. Finally emboldened to speak, I walked out of the boardroom, the hum of the city below echoing like a heartbeat. Every step resonated not just with victory, but with purpose. Mentorship programs were immediately scheduled. Leadership pipelines for underrepresented employees were implemented. And slowly, I realized, this was bigger than me. Bigger than Redwood Global. It was a statement to every young Black professional. Every overlooked talent. You belong. Your voice matters. Your presence is not negotiable. Later, as I stepped onto the streets of Midtown, the city lights reflected a sense of triumph and belonging I had rarely felt. News outlets ran headlines celebrating accountability and courage. Colleagues approached me, some with gratitude, others with quiet acknowledgement. Social media posts circulated my story, amplifying it across communities I'd never imagined reaching. I paused by the curb, looked up at the skyline, and thought about every young Black engineer, creative, or professional who had been told they weren't enough, that their voice was invisible. This wasn't just corporate victory. It was cultural validation, a reminder that systemic obstacles can be confronted, and sometimes even dismantled, with strategy, courage, and relentless truth. The night air carried a mix of adrenaline, relief, and pride. My phone buzzed. Messages from colleagues, students, mentees, even strangers I'd never met. They weren't thanking Malik Thompson, they were celebrating possibility, representation, and resilience. And that, I realized, was the ultimate reward, turning personal struggle into collective empowerment, revenge into reform, tension into transformation. Standing there, I made a vow. This was only the beginning. If one man could shift the culture of a corporation, imagine what a network of voices, empowered and supported, could do. The city felt alive with that potential, and I knew I would continue to champion it. One strategic step, one courageous conversation, one empowered employee at a time. Because victory isn't about taking down one person, it's about building systems that uplift everyone. And tonight, Malik Thompson didn't just win. He ignited a movement. The first days after the Redwood Showdown felt surreal. I walked through the halls of the company and noticed subtle shifts that I had only dreamed of before. Where tension had once hovered like smoke above every meeting, now there was a sense of cautious optimism. People made eye contact without suspicion. Voices that had been quiet for years began to speak. I could feel it in the energy. Change wasn't just happening on paper, it was alive. Yet, change on paper was just the beginning. I had uncovered a system fraught with inequality and manipulation. And now I had to ensure it stayed exposed and corrected. That meant creating structures, accountability, mentorship, real tools to prevent another Serena, another abuse of power. I started with mentorship. I sought out the young Black professionals who had been hesitant to assert themselves. I met with them individually, sometimes over coffee, sometimes late at night when the office lights were dim but hope burned bright. You deserve your voice, I told them. You deserve your seat at this table. And no one, not even the most powerful person in the room, can take that away from you unless you allow it. The faces I met reflected relief, skepticism, and, eventually, determination. They asked questions about career growth, leadership, and resilience. I shared everything I'd learned. How to navigate office politics without compromising values. How to build networks. How to spot manipulation early. And, most importantly, how to transform anger into constructive action. Meanwhile, social media had become a megaphone for the movement. Clips from the boardroom confrontation went viral. Videos showed me presenting the evidence, encouraging employees to speak, and standing firm despite Serena's intimidation. Comments poured in from young professionals across the country. Finally, someone who looks like me showing that corporate spaces can be fought for and won. I'm inspired to apply for positions I thought were out of reach. This proves accountability can be real. Every message was a reminder that the story had grown beyond Redwood. It had become symbolic, a representation of courage, strategy, and resilience. I realized that my actions had not only changed one corporation but had begun to shift culture, inspiring a generation of Black professionals to claim their space unapologetically. Internally, I worked to institutionalize change. Leadership development programs, transparent promotion processes, and diversity oversight committees were implemented. Every policy carried my fingerprints, not as control, but as guidance, a safeguard against the old dynamics. Employees began reporting issues without fear. Departments that had struggled with cohesion now functioned with mutual respect and accountability. The company, once a pressure cooker of politics, was becoming a laboratory for transformation. But the real test came with the public perception. News outlets, podcasts, and LinkedIn features focused not only on the scandal but on the solutions. Interviews forced me to articulate the deeper lessons, that structural inequities are persistent. But they are not unchangeable. That courage is contagious. That visibility matters. In each conversation, I stressed community, the importance of supporting each other, mentoring young talent, and refusing to accept systemic silence as the status quo. Through this, I also learned about the subtleties of influence. Power isn't just about confrontation, it's about relationships, reputation, and credibility. I fostered alliances with other leaders who shared my vision. Together, we discussed policy reforms, mentorship networks, and public awareness campaigns. Slowly, we began to create a coalition, a network of professionals committed to accountability and equity. Yet, it wasn't all victories. Serena, while diminished, remained a figure of influence. She tried to subtly undermine initiatives, push her agenda through proxies, and challenge committee decisions. Each attempt reminded me that vigilance is perpetual. Reform is not a single act, it is a continuous commitment. But the difference now was that the culture of Redwood was changing. Allies supported one another openly, and employees felt empowered to confront even the most subtle forms of manipulation. Outside the corporate walls, the story took on a symbolic weight. Young professionals, particularly Black professionals, shared my journey as a blueprint for strategic empowerment. They posted their own boardroom experiences, mentorship wins, and initiatives inspired by Redwood's transformation. Conferences invited me to speak on corporate justice, accountability, and the strategic use of evidence in professional environments. I realized my story had transcended personal revenge. It had become a lesson in strategic, ethical, and impactful empowerment. One afternoon, I received a message from a young woman named Tia, a junior analyst at a company in Chicago. "Malik, I watched your viral clips and it changed how I see my career. I confronted my director today about a project being mishandled, and I felt prepared because of your approach. Thank you for showing me what's possible." Her words struck me with a profound truth. Legacy isn't about the battles you win for yourself. It's about enabling others to win, to thrive, and to feel visible and capable in spaces that have historically marginalized them. Months passed. Redwood Global stabilized under new leadership dynamics. Employee satisfaction soared, attrition dropped, and I continued my dual role, remaining strategic in the corporate game while mentoring, guiding, and amplifying voices that had once been silenced. Every Friday, I hosted empowerment huddles for younger employees. Not formal trainings, but conversations on strategy, resilience, and visibility. I shared personal stories, offered guidance, and encouraged critical thinking about corporate dynamics. Slowly, a culture of empowerment permeated the office, one built on transparency, mentorship, and mutual accountability. Social media continued to be a force multiplier. The narrative evolved from a personal battle to a collective movement. My story was now a template for corporate reform, mentorship programs, and social justice advocacy in professional spaces. Students, early career professionals, and seasoned employees alike shared their applications of these lessons. Each post, each comment, each shared clip amplified the ripple effect, reinforcing the idea that courage and strategy could redefine systemic inequality. Standing on the balcony of Redwood's Midtown office one evening, I watched the city lights shimmer over the streets. I thought about the young Black professionals whose confidence had been ignited, about colleagues empowered to speak truth to power, about the movement that had emerged from one man's refusal to accept silence. And I felt a profound responsibility. This was more than a victory, it was a covenant. A pledge to continue shaping spaces where equity, accountability, and courage could thrive. In that moment, I knew the fight wasn't over. Serena would adapt, the corporate world would continue to test boundaries, and challenges would arise, but the narrative had shifted irrevocably. The story wasn't just about Malik Thompson. It was about a generation that would no longer accept invisibility, injustice, or manipulation. It was about every young professional daring to claim their space and speak their truth. Amplified by the strategy, courage, and mentorship that had transformed one company into a symbol of possibility. And so, as the city pulsed below, I stepped back inside, ready to continue the work. Legacy isn't built in a moment, it's cultivated through persistence, mentorship, and the unrelenting commitment to justice. And I was determined to see it through, not just at Redwood, but wherever courage, equity, and empowerment were needed. Because victory is fleeting, but legacy, influence, and transformation, those endure. And if one man's journey could spark a movement, imagine what a generation empowered could achieve. The Redwood saga had transformed from a personal battle into a beacon of hope. Looking back, it was almost surreal how far we had come. The company had been tested. And through that test, it had evolved. But more importantly, people had changed. Courage had become contagious. Visibility had become power. And the narrative, that Black professionals could not only survive but thrive, had been rewritten. I walked through the corridors one last time before heading to a city-wide empowerment conference. The echoes of past confrontations still lingered, but now they served as lessons rather than scars. I thought about the employees who had once whispered their concerns in fear, now openly leading discussions, mentoring their juniors, and challenging the old norms. I thought about the interns who had once doubted if they belonged in corporate spaces, now confidently presenting ideas to senior leadership. I thought about Tia and countless others whose stories had begun to ripple far beyond Redwood. The truth was clear. Change isn't handed to you. It's earned through strategy, resilience, and relentless courage. But courage alone is not enough. It must be paired with accountability. One voice can spark the fire, but sustained transformation requires collective action. It requires systems, mentorship, and a commitment to equity. And most importantly, it requires you to recognize that your story, your presence, and your voice matter. As I took the stage at the conference, I looked out at hundreds of faces, each reflecting hope, determination, and the desire to claim space in their own careers. I began. I know what it feels like to walk into a room and feel invisible. To have your talent overlooked, your voice silenced, and your efforts undermined. But I'm here to tell you this. Your worth is not determined by those who doubt you. It is defined by your vision, your strategy, and your courage to act. Hands shot up, questions poured in, and stories were shared. The energy was palpable. Every question reflected someone seeking the guidance, validation, or mentorship that could transform potential into impact. And as I answered each one, I realized the most powerful lesson of all. Legacy isn't about individual victories. It's about the people you empower along the way. After the session, social media lit up with posts and comments from attendees. Malik's story gave me the courage to confront bias at my workplace. I finally feel like I have a strategy to thrive in spaces that were never designed for me. This is the blueprint we've been waiting for. The narrative had grown beyond Redwood. It had become a movement, a living, breathing testament that accountability, mentorship, and strategic courage could transform corporate spaces. And more importantly, it was a reminder that no one should ever feel that their voice doesn't matter. But empowerment isn't passive, it demands action. Every story shared, every mentor guided, every challenge faced contributes to a culture of equity and visibility. It's a chain reaction, one act of courage inspiring the next. And the question we all must ask ourselves is simple. Will we step up, speak out, and shape the spaces we inhabit? For those watching, reading, or listening to this story, here's what I want you to take away. Claim your space. Don't wait for permission. Don't let doubt define your limits. Document and strategize. Knowledge and evidence are your allies in challenging unfair systems. Mentor and empower. Your success is magnified when you lift others along the way. Speak truth to power. Accountability is not optional, it is essential. Be relentless in legacy building. Victory fades, but influence and empowerment endure. The world will test you. Power will challenge you. Systems will resist you. But history belongs to those who act strategically, courageously, and with integrity. And if you embrace that, your story can become the spark that ignites change, not just for yourself, but for a generation. So I leave you with this: rise, speak, empower, strategize, document, mentor, and never underestimate the ripple effect of your courage. Your journey, your voice, and your victories matter. The fight for equity, visibility, and accountability is ongoing, but every action counts. Every story shared amplifies the movement. Every individual empowered contributes to a legacy that cannot be erased. And now, I challenge you. Take that first step today. Whether it's speaking up in a meeting, mentoring a colleague, or standing firm against injustice, make your move. Share your story. Comment on someone else's. Support those lifting as you climb. Tag a friend who needs to hear this. Like, share, and amplify the voices that matter. Because together, we don't just survive the system, we redefine it. The stage is set. The legacy is ours to create. And remember, when we rise together, no corporate system, no obstacle, and no injustice can hold us back.